Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on the JayBee Milly channel. I am JayBee and I just finished watching the very first episode of HBO Max's Velma show that just came out, so I'm pretty fresh off from things, so this isn't going to be a review, so don't expect any in-depth analysis. This is merely just my first impressions of episode 1. I'm yet to watch episode 2 yet. I'll make a similar video when I watch that, no doubt. So I am going to do a full review with Milly at some point. We're going to record it maybe over the weekend and we're going to release it as a formal episode of the podcast. So that's going to include different visuals and references to what we're talking about. So this is just going to remain on this visual, almost just like quick podcast format. So I'm going to get into this. Now, I debated with myself on a lot of the format of this video, if I'm going to start off by what I didn't like, start off with what I did like, and then kind of reach a verdict. And I don't know, I kind of feel like that would be doing everything a disservice because it's a mixed bag, and to that end I kind of feel like breaking it up in terms of little mini reviews of different sections may be the best way to go about things. So I'm going to do a little short section on the beginning, the middle, and then the end, and hopefully I can find some way to articulate my point correctly so that even I understand what exactly I'm trying to say, because I am quite conflicted with this show so far. So cutting the intro short a little bit, I am going to be discussing everything from the HBO Max logo up until, I guess this is slight spoiler alert, the Velma title screen shows up. And I'm going to be honest, I really hated the intro. I thought that it is exactly what the critics were saying about it before it was even released. I think it was overly crude for the sake of being crude. I think the crassness came across as a little bit too brash, and the characterizations was just so abrasive, and I realize I'm using a lot of buzzwords, but that's the only way that I can articulate it. I think every way it could have gone wrong, it went wrong in the intro, and that's just my personal opinion. So without describing what we exactly see from it, I will say that there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humour. A lot of things are pointed out to us, the audience, and they're trying to play off a lot of tropes. The issue is when they're criticising certain tropes and certain things that always seem to happen in different TV shows, they are themselves guilty of doing those exact same things. Does that kind of make sense? Like, just because they're pointing it out and making fun of it doesn't make it excusable for them to do it. And I think we've seen that a lot of times with a lot of different TV shows, and sometimes they do it right. So the idea of parodying a certain thing works for something for me personally, for like the Kingsman movie, the first one, where it was like, oh yeah, this isn't a typical spy story, and true to form, they followed through with a unique original take of a classic formula. And the intro here is trying to be a bit quirky and say, oh, we're not just like your average teen shows, but then they are themselves doing the very thing that they are making fun of, and that doesn't really make sense. Like, making fun of yourself, being self-aware, self-deprecating isn't a get out of jail free card. And so yeah, the intro, honestly, I think it's actually going to be a detriment to the series more so than people think, because a lot of people are very divided about the show. They're not going to give it a chance, or they're going to hate watch episode 1. And I think that a lot of people are going to turn it off before they've even seen the Velma title, because genuinely, it isn't fantastic. So that's my piece. The intro is awful. I didn't like it. I think that it was the lowest common denominator. But then the intro kind of, the title screen is shown, and we enter a bit of a different show. So now we're in a situation where we're introduced to a lot of the characters that we're going to be following throughout the whole series. This has all been in the trailer, this has all been in everything, so it isn't too spoilery for me to say that we are of course introduced to Fred, Daphne, Norville, and of course further introduced to Velma. And honestly, I think a lot of it is going to be riding on how you feel about Fred. Personally, I actually quite like Fred. Maybe don't hold me to this because this is just my first impressions, fresh off watching just episode 1 alone. I think Fred may be one of my favourite characters in the series. I know that's going to be divisive, but hand on heart, he kind of does remind me a bit of Freddie Prinze Jr.'s Fred from the 2002 movie more specifically, and you can argue that that's a bit too over egotistical or whatever, but I kind of feel like he's gonna be a bit more endearing. If not, he's gonna be that almost lovable himbo type character, which I'm there for, to be honest. Now, going into the rest of it, not really any complaints with Constant Wu's Daphne. She does a pretty fine job. I don't really know Constant Wu as a performer, as a personality, so I have no clue she's even trying to sound like Daphne. But regardless, the voice that she is using, whether it's hers or she's putting one on, I don't think it isn't not Daphne. I think she does a pretty decent job at it. And I guess same with Mindy Kaling. I think it's just a bit more distracting in regards to Mindy Kaling, purely because I've seen her in so many projects that I just hear, you know, Kelly Kapoor from The Office, for example. Like, there's not really any variation. I don't hear Velma. I'm hearing Kelly. I'm hearing Mindy. You know, that's the kind of issue that I've got, and I think that's common with a lot of celebrity voice actors. It's a bit tricky, but you know, I mean, even after this, the earlier parts do have a lot of hit and miss humor, at least for me. Now, you could find this show the funniest thing on planet Earth. I would disagree with you. You could tell me that not one joke landed, and I could disagree with you. When you're reviewing comedy, it's just kind of ridiculous, because there's no way of saying this is good comedy, that's bad comedy, because we've all got our own kind of funny bone that's tickled in various ways. I'll say this, when the show is actively pointing at something, saying, look at this, that's funny, that's quirky, look how wacky and bizarre this is, to me that's just cringy. And I can't really find any spoiler-free examples, but you'll know them when they see it, because when there is a joke that they want you to laugh at, they will shove that joke in your face, and it'll be loud. Now, there's a bit more nuance. Maybe some of the morbid humour's working for me a bit more, because I'm, like, from the UK. I've grown up on Fawlty Towers, the UK version of The Office. More, like, subtle, nuanced, dare I say, satirical comedy, and there's a little bit of this peppered throughout the show that I'm actually there for. I won't lie, there were a few situations in this show where I did actually laugh out loud, and that isn't easy to do with me, just because I'm not one to fully express myself in that way. Equally though, there were moments and jokes where I actively cringed and had to look away from the screen, so it's doing a job. Like, it hasn't bored me so far. Now we're discussing the middle of the show. It hasn't bored me. It's always made me feel something, whether it is cringy, whether it is disgusted, or actual genuine enjoyment. And, you know, that's the kind of thing here. That's maybe the highest praise I can give to at least the first section of this episode. At no point was I bored. So kind of elaborating on the cringiness, there's a lot of, like, just, you know, the type of thing where you can tell it's just being written by someone that wants to seem cool and kind of with the trends. Like, I'm sure we've got a whole section dedicated to, like, it basically reads, oh my gosh, look, our writers know what a hashtag is. And it is like, come on, like, that's old, even for me now. That's old stuff. Like, it's a bit confused, because I think I'm at a really weird stage in life where I am young enough to understand the relative stuff with technology and pop culture references, but it also makes references to certain names that I have no idea who they are. So I don't know if I'm just out of the loop with stuff. Let me know in the comment section. But there were some pop culture references that I don't feel completely landed, or at the very least, they could. When you're making a pop culture reference, you do stand the risk of alienating that bit of your audience that doesn't get it, and then I feel like pop culture reference should very rarely be something that you rely on for comedy, because even if it's good today, so if I think about something that we all know today, so Billie Eilish, I think we're all pretty familiar with her, Millie Bobby Brown, you know, like names like that, that are just so, like, Jenna Ortega, that is so prevalent in our society, they could fall off tomorrow. And so for all that could make us, like, rolling on, for all that could make us laugh out loud today, and maybe even for years to come, think about how we still enjoy Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? All these years later, 50 years later. That's fine, but let's see this Velma show. If they really want this to be successful, what's good today should be good in 50 years' time from now. So when they just constantly bombard you with pop culture references, it's like, do you want this show to age like milk? Maybe. That aside, something else that was happening a bit surprisingly within the middle of the episode, I guess we're going a bit more towards the conclusion now perhaps, but a lot of gore. Not gratuitous gore, not gore to the point where you feel like they're just kind of making it clear that they're an adult show. I think they use it sparingly enough, but it almost seems inconsequential, which is a bit conflicting to me personally, because I don't mind that in adult animation. Like, Rick and Morty, I do actually really like, and there you can have whole towns, cities blowing up in pretty bloody fashion. But when this show is dealing with a killer who is causing harm to people, they're the big bad, they're the threat, it's like, okay, we need their actions to mean something though. And when there's just situations where people are losing limbs, people are getting horrifically hurt, and it's either played off casually or for a joke, it's a bit like, so what are the rules of this universe? Is grievous bodily harm funny? Or is grievous bodily harm the nature of what our villain's doing? Like, I don't think you can quite have it both ways. Or who's to say that next time someone is a victim of the murderer, we're not just going to say, oh, hey, LOL, hashtag, that was bad, wasn't it? And it's just going to be some quirky little joke. Like, why are we meant to care about the next victim that we see on screen when the last person that was hurt, it was just a joke? Maybe I even think it's a little bit of a bleed over from the MCU, because that gets under a lot of criticism for endless jokes and the endless need to water down emotional scenes with a joke, and yet it continuously makes so much money at the box office. Maybe that's what this show thinks our generation wants, is just constant jokes, and I see that working out for them to an extent. I think Family Guy especially, you think about that, that's seen a crazy resurgence on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, because they kind of phrase things to be clipped to the point where it's just a nice little sequence within and of itself. I just don't feel like this show even has that factor, where there are some scenes which do feel like they're just set up for a joke, but it's either it either leads to such a bizarre reference point, or just something kind of stupid, that it's not shocking enough to be YouTube clipped, but it's also not impactful enough to serve the story. I think that's the main issue. It's kind of just treading water with this first episode. So now tackling the ending, it's decent, I can't lie. There's a lot of things that are funny that I actually did enjoy. Again, it leans into a bit of gore, but I can kind of see it having an impact. It wasn't just, look, it's a joke. I mean, it kind of wasn't, it kind of wasn't, but I do think it sets us up for episode 2 pretty nicely. So overall, I don't know what I'd give this episode. I do think I enjoyed it more than I didn't enjoy it. I think I'm coming off this episode more positively. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for the intro, I think I would even go as far to say that I liked this episode, but that intro was just not it, and there's going to be so many people bashing the episode because of that intro, and rightfully so. Like, I don't blame people for turning off after the first 5 minutes, because that's kind of how long it goes on for, and it's just a shame. I kind of feel like the show set itself up to fail. But that's just my initial thoughts. Sorry if it was a bit messy, a bit jumbled, a bit unpolished. But like I say, the full in-depth review on it will be out at some point. We're not going to rush it, because we do just want to sit with the episode for a bit and kind of formulate our points properly. So yeah, if you do want to see that, then please like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.